Good afternoon. My name is David Lewis. It's my privilege to serve here at the Lutheran Theological Seminary of Philadelphia as the president. And I am excited to have you here and welcome you to campus for another free continuing education event. We're trying to do those from time to time because we want to remind you that we are your seminary, whether you're a graduate of the school or in the synod or in this particular denomination. We are here in the city for good and want to be a resource to all of you in as many ways as possible. So today I am delighted to introduce you to and to welcome to our school Beth Lewis, who is the CEO of Augsburg Fortress. Beth is a person of tremendous intellect and faith and business competence and experience, a combination that is rare in any time or place in the church, and so we have been blessed by her leadership. She came to the role that she's in now when an institution, a venerable institution that had existed for many years and was the result of different changes and mergers over that time, was at a place of particular challenge. An industry that had seemed invulnerable to change for many years suddenly was pressed to change in dramatic and radical ways, that was feeling financial vulnerability in different corners, that was stressed in a variety of ways. Wait, are we talking about publishing or seminary education? But what Beth then did was lead that organization through not one, but an ongoing series of strategic planning and visioning sessions that has positioned them, as you know, if you've paid attention at all to the resources that Augsburg Fortress has been putting out in recent years. They are compelling, they are attractive, they are geared to a variety of the generations that we are finding in our congregations, and they are such an aid and gift to those of us who lead ministry ventures in our congregations. And so it's a delight to be able to welcome her here, but also to thank her for that work and time and energy and passion. It has yielded fruits that you will never know about, even though we will try to tell you how much we appreciate that creative work. So thank you. Please join me in welcoming Beth Lewis.
Thank you, my friend. I am absolutely delighted to be with you this afternoon. I was telling David earlier that I think it has been nearly 10 years since I was on this campus, because I was here for the launch in October of 2006 of Evangelical Lutheran Worship, our worship resources for the ELCA and the ELCIC. Yeah, that's right. So it's really fun to be back, and it was nice of you to have the snowstorm last weekend instead of this weekend when I was here. You know, one of the things that folks asked me as we were gathering was, do you have a handout of the slides for us? And the answer to that is no, because I was editing this late yesterday afternoon. Now you have to know that I've given this presentation 100 times, 150 times, I don't know, and it changes every time because I learn new stuff, and I learned stuff just yesterday. I'd like to ask the folks who are here from Lutheran Church of the Holy Communion to stand up. Come on, don't be shy. If you want to learn about congregational hospitality, I would encourage you to go worship with these good people and their colleagues. So thank you. And you'll see some examples from just yesterday that I inserted. So that's why there's no handouts. But my contact information will be on the very last slide. Or you can find me on Twitter or Facebook or wherever else you want to find me. And if you say, hey, Beth, send me those congregational hospitality slides from today, I'll be happy to email them to you. So don't be shy about asking that. So we will get started. We all know there is plenty of biblical mandate for being welcoming people in our congregations, in our seminaries, in our synods, in our ministries of publishing, and all the other places where we serve God's people. Now, I have been privileged to be the president and CEO for Augsburg Fortress for a little over 13 years. Time flies when you're having fun. And because of that, I worship in a different congregation almost every week. And sometimes 2 or 3 congregations in a given week. And so I have seen the good, the bad, and yes, the really, really ugly. It is not fiction, as we were talking before, that sometimes a guest will sit in a pew and be invited to move because that's my seat. And this gentleman and I had a conversation about having had that happen. It was it was my very first weekend in Minneapolis as the new CEO for Augsburg Fortress, and I went to a congregation that shall remain nameless. And I was sitting in the pew before worship, head down. And you know how you get that sixth sense that somebody's there? And I looked up, and the 3 matriarchs, you know them, right? They were standing like this. I moved. So, good news is I'm only going to share with you good ideas. And if you want the bad or the really ugly, you have to buy me a drink later. So, here's my hope for this session. My hope is that you're going to see close to 100 slides and that you will not try to remember everything, but that you will think about 2 or 3 things that are actionable in your context. Things that you can try, and you know, I'm all about metrics. I'm a business person, right? I'm leading a ministry of publishing, but make no mistake, I spent most of my career in Fortune 500 companies. I'm a business person. If you don't have a metric, a goal, something you're aiming for, you're never going to get there. So what I want you to do is commit to looking for 2 or 3 things that you can take back to your ministry context and try out sometime in the next 2 or 3 months. And they might work, and they might not, because all of our contexts are different. But I'd like you to challenge yourself and your congregation to do that. So, as I mentioned, I was privileged to worship at Lutheran Church of the Holy Communion yesterday, and it was a delight. So the other thing I want you to think about is somewhere along the way in the next year, showing up for worship there. They do hospitality so beautifully. Is it perfect? Of course not. None of us are perfect, but they do a lot of things well. Now, the first thing I would challenge you to do once you get back to your space is to think about having a hospitality audit. Select a small team of folks, ideally intergenerational. It's really wonderful if you can find someone to be on the team who has been there, less than 6 months. And I know in some congregations that's nigh unto impossible. But if you can, it's great. And walk through the various parts of engaging with a congregation and look for opportunities to tweak here and tweak there. Often it's not big things that need to happen, it's little things. Sometimes it's big things. If that doesn't really work for you because you don't have any newcomers or you don't have any youth or kids to participate on an intergenerational team, at least think about having an audit team and inviting your colleagues from the Presbyterian congregation down the street or the Episcopal congregation across town or even another ELCA congregation and invite them to have a hospitality audit team and swap. And look for the things that with our familiar eyes, we're in and out of those doors, in and out of that sanctuary. We know where the restrooms are. We know where the nursery is. Look, have those folks from that other congregation come in and give you feedback, and you do the same for them. It's a really helpful way to partner. When I am coming into town, I often will say, okay, I'm going to be worshiping at such and such a church on Sunday morning. And so one of my tests, if you will, is to call them on Saturday night when no one is there, because I want to know, what does that voicemail message say? Does it tell me when the worship is? If there are multiple worship services, does it tell me which ones are traditional or which ones are contemporary or in another language? Does it tell me that there is a nursery if I happen to be a mom with young kids? Does it tell me if parking is somehow unusual, like in an urban congregation where you need to park in a parking ramp nearby? What does that message say? So one of the things you might try is to call your own congregational voicemail message on a Saturday night and find out what it says, and then fix it. One of the things I do as I travel around the church is I get to borrow great ideas from folks. So the thing over here on your left is some signs that St. Paul Lutheran Church in Stillwater, Minnesota had made up. They're like those, we're going to see so many of them, election signs that people plant in their front yards, except as you see, this one says, "I love my church," and has their website on it. And all of the members took one of these or two of these, and they planted them in their front yard or in front of their small business. And it created a buzz and some conversation about this congregation, because it's a great way for someone who's walking by while they're out gardening to say, well, why do you love your church? Where is that church? And start a conversation. Really good for shy Presbyterians, Lutherans, Episcopalians who don't want to invite folks actually to their congregation. The other thing there are business cards that are fold-over cards. These came from Desert Streams Lutheran Church in Surprise, Arizona. And this one happens to have the pastor's name on it, but in fact, they have blank ones that are handed out 10, 12, 15 at a time to everyone who's a part of that worshiping community. And on it, it has their website, it tells when their worship services are, it has their URL, has a little map about where to find them because it's a Mission Start church, so they meet in a school. And it's an easy way for shy Christians to invite others to come to worship. Now, if I'm in your neighborhood and I drive by, whether I'm new to the neighborhood or I live in the neighborhood and I've driven by for 27 years, but I've never actually noticed your church, one of the things, if I'm looking for a congregation, that I will do is I'll see the sign. Well, now, one of these days I'm going to be in big trouble because one of these signs people are going to be in the audience. But for now, let's look at what's good and what's not so good about these signs. So the big one that's quite elegant looking, St. John's Lutheran Church, where the Reverend Marvin, I can't quite read it, Marvin Henk is the pastor. I'm sure Marvin's a lovely person. I have no idea who Marvin is. I hope he's not in the synod. And that's terrific, except it doesn't tell me anything. It tells me the name of the church and the name of the pastor. Pastors, we love you. I don't care what your name is. I do care that there are worship opportunities, like at St. Paul's Lutheran Church. And here's the times. And there is children's school, church school on September through May. It gives me some information. It's even got an arrow. It also has the pastor's name. That's okay. I really don't object to that. But it's not the only thing. The one that I think is the best of these is the one at the bottom. It might not be the most attractive, but what it says is, what flavor of Lutheran are we? We're ELCA, thank you. It says that we have an accessible campus. It says, here's when our worship is, when is our Sunday school, and yes, all are welcome. There's one big, big, big thing missing on all of these. What is it? Not the phone number. Website. It's the website. If you don't have real estate on your sign for anything else, make sure your web address is on the sign. Now, this assumes that you have a website, and this assumes that it's a decent website. And we're going to spend a lot of this session talking about that. But let's assume those things for now. And I encourage you to make sure that your web URL is on your street sign. But there are other signs. There are signs to help people find their way. Where do guests park? Oh, and note that word, guest, not visitor. If someone visits your home, they might be a guest or not. They might be there to sell you insurance. But if someone's a guest in your home, it has a different feel, a different level of warmth. So let's talk about guests in our congregations. And I love this sign on the far right. That's actually for the folks who are there. This is in someone's parking lot where they're driving out, and it reminds us, whether we are members or folks who are there for an AA group or we're there for some other event, it reminds us that the mission field is all around us. So that faces inward into the parking lot so that we see it as we're driving out. The one over at the bottom left is my favorite. I saw this online, and it was at First United Methodist Church in Kalamazoo, Michigan. And I was so tickled about it that I called the pastor because I had to find out what this was about. You see, I used to live in Boca Raton, Florida. Now, I don't know if you know anything about Boca Raton, but it would not surprise me to see valet parking at a church in Boca Raton. It did surprise me to see it in Kalamazoo, Michigan. So I said, what? And he shared the story after chuckling a bit. It turns out that they had a construction project, and they were building an extension and a new parking lot and a new entrance, and so they had to have people park at a school parking lot down the way a couple blocks. Well, that was fine, except some of the elders were maybe not so thrilled that they had to park and walk, and for some of them it was a real problem with mobility. So they decided to do what restaurants do. They launched a valet parking system while they were having this construction. And I always think, I hope they had good insurance, because they invited the youth and young adults to be the valet parkers. Now, the youth director, being a smart cookie, put out a little can that said tips to support the youth mission trip in the summer. Well, the tips started coming in, and the people loved it, and the building got built, and the valet parking sign went away. Grumble, grumble, grumble. I know there's no grumbling ever goes on in any of your congregations, but I have heard that sometimes there is grumbling. Anyway, so they put it back up because it was a win-win for an intergenerational connection, even just a little bit, between those young people and young adults and some of the older folks in the congregation. It was raising money for this mission trip for the kids, and everyone was happy. So think about signs. So let's say if someone is in your neighborhood or in your town and they think, I want to find a church home, or at least I want to find a church to visit. Where are they going to go? Well, they might drive on, they might Google it. More and more, we see they might go to Yelp. So is your congregation on Yelp? And if you don't know what Yelp is, it's yelp.com. You can go find it. And you can put up information, including a picture and information about your worship services and your web address on Yelp. And you can add reviews. It can be reviews that you write as people who love this congregation. And as folks search by zip code for a congregation, they may find you. How about the ELCA.org site? Many people go to the congregation search item. In fact, I've heard from my colleagues in Chicago that it's the most used piece of the ELCA.org site to search for a congregation, whether it's by language, by zip code, whatever it might be, the different search criteria. Most of them have just this ugly little sketch of a silhouette of a generic church. But if you go to that URL, you can make sure, first of all, that the information is accurate, and that's a really good thing to do because it often isn't. And you can submit a photo of your congregation so that folks can get a sense of what it looks like. And as they're driving by, they might actually recognize it. And it just gives it some life rather than that generic silhouette. So that's a good URL to note. I said we're going to spend a lot of time talking about your websites, and indeed we are, because it is your welcome mat to the world these days. And it is critically important, and yet many of them look something like this. It is depressing. When I'm doing presentations like this, I often try to find local examples, positive examples. And sometimes that's pretty easy, and other times it is nigh unto impossible. So I encourage you to really invest time, energy, and yes, some money in making certain that your website is something that you can be proud of and that's kept up to date. I was on a website of a congregation that will be, again, remain nameless, and right smack on the homepage, I was being invited to the Christmas services for December 2015. It's February. So if you don't think it's important, let me point out that in excess of 80% of Americans use the internet. And the fastest growing group are folks in the 65 or older age. And indeed, we come in, I don't know, that's a little faded out. It's actually a bottom line that I don't think you can see there. We come in at about 50% of folks who are 65 and older are on the internet with some regularity in the United States. So if you don't think that you need to be on the internet because most of the folks in your congregation are 65 plus, think again. But before you begin updating your website, you need to stop and think about what's the point? Why are we doing this? Well, who's it for? And it's probably several different audiences. It's probably for your neighbors. It's probably for folks you hope will come and worship with you, maybe even join. It might be for folks who might send their kids to your VBS program in the summer. It might be for your members to find information about what's going on. It might be for synod staff to be able to get information. It might be for ministry partners in the community. Who knows? There's lots of different folks that you need to be thinking about in terms of what is on your website. And how will they find out about your website? Where will you put that web address, that URL? Well, we already know you're going to put it on the sign outside, and we know that you're going to include it in any email you send out will have it, and so forth and so on. Think about getting that URL out to as many different places as you can, including making sure it's on the elca.org website and Yelp. Once they get to your website, what do you want them to do? Well, it depends on who the audience is. So you have to think through the organization of your website about who it is you're trying to reach and what is it that that group of people you want them to engage with. And how will they decide to do that, and what actions will they take, and how will it integrate with your social media? And we'll talk about social media shortly. Is it possible to have too much information on a site, or would you rather have them reach out to get more information? I think it needs to be thorough enough that I feel like it's a congregation where there's some stuff happening, that I might want to be a part of it. On the other hand, I'd rather have it be one page, simple, elegant, and accurate, and up to date, than be filled with information that's out of date, that's clunky and old-fashioned looking and ugly. So err on the side of currency and simplicity for finding the information, because there's nothing worse than going to a website for a congregation and seeing out-of-date information. Thank you. So what are the kinds of things you might have? Well, I know a lot of you already know this, but map and directions should be easy to find. That should be pretty simple to find from that home page, because if I'm not from your congregation, that's probably one of the things I'm going to be looking for. I love this. I found it at Christ the King Lutheran Church in Miami, and if you have a large congregation with a large campus, they actually have a map of their campus. Now, I know most of our congregations don't have this problem, but it's a helpful thing to think about if you happen to be from a larger congregation or it's complicated to get into your parking area. How do you welcome first-time visitors? Well, I love this from Upper Dublin Lutheran Church in Ambler, and my favorite part is this. Can you read this? It says, "Feel free to bring your coffee with you. The pastors do." And so there are multiple things I love about that. One is, I love the fact that that's hospitality. And I know some congregations in your sanctuaries, you get nervous about the fabrics and so forth. I get that, but when you think about the ubiquitous nature of Starbucks and how folks of several generations now walk everywhere with their coffee, what does that say about welcome? If you have the, don't do that. I'm not saying you have to do this. I'm saying think about doing this. But you know what I love the most about this? The humor. The pastors do. It's a lightness, a light touch in the messaging that says that we're pretty relaxed. And I love that tone that you see with this website. Abiding Savior in Fort Lauderdale has a really nice prayer request form on their website that you can go in, and if you have a prayer request, you can submit something, and they have their prayer chain folks pray for you or whatever it is you've asked for. They've told me that they get hits from literally around the world of people needing and requesting prayer. That's hospitality. That's being God's people doing work in God's world for God's people. Jordan Lutheran Church, they have a really nice calendar, and there are many different formats. I like this one. I like the color in it because it's got a sense of life to it. It's not just a straight listing. Again, this is a place where if you're going to have one, make sure it's up to date. St. John's in Sayre, Pennsylvania, lots of information about their community service activities, the things that they do in reaching out beyond the four walls of their church building. You know, the Gallup organization has done a longitudinal study for decades of American religion, and one of the things that they have found consistently is that people who are not members of a church, but then become members of a congregation, something like 85% of them come first, not through the front door of worship, but through the back door of serving people. That we are drawn to do good. We are drawn to help others. We're drawn to feed the poor, to help with a habitat project or whatever. So let folks know of all those grand opportunities for doing service and helping others that are a part of the fabric of your congregation's life. Feature unique assets in your congregation. Sometimes I hear, because you know, in the ELCA, and I know in the Presbyterian Church and in the United Methodist Church, more than half of our congregations have fewer than 100 people in worship on a Sunday. They're pretty small. And sometimes I hear folks from smaller congregations saying, well, we don't really have much to offer because we're small. No, you have stuff to offer. So what is it? I don't know what it is. This congregation has a walking trail on their property, and so they feature it on their website. That's terrific. A congregation outside of Milwaukee was gifted a set of creches, like, 50, 60 creches from a member who died. And so they built cabinets and those creches are on display year-round. And so they have trained docents who, after worship, will give tours of the creches and talk about this one that came from Tanzania, and this one that came from Korea, and this one that was hand-carved by a member of the congregation. So what are the assets in your congregation that you can feature? There's something. There's something. Might be in a closet somewhere, by the way. What languages do your neighbors speak? Almost all of our ELCA congregations are in English only, and maybe in your context that's fine. But at Bethel Lutheran Church in Madison, Wisconsin, they have their English site and they have the full site in Spanish. Now, is Madison, Wisconsin where you would think of for a Spanish language ELCA congregation? Perhaps not. We might think of that in Florida or Texas or California. But in fact, we have neighbors who speak other languages at home all around us, all across this beautiful country, and all around our congregations. So whether those neighbors are members yet or engaging with you yet, what does it say about hospitality if your sign in front is not only in English, but is in Korean? Or what does it say if your website, even if it's not the whole thing, but some of it, the basic information, is not only in English, but is in Hmong? What is the opportunity here? Connections to the larger church. Are you an ELCA or a PCUSA congregation that's all by yourself? No. You have connections. You have partners in ministry. I love this one in particular because one of their partners in ministry is Augsburg Fortress. Don't know why, it just appealed to me. But often it's the synod, it's the church-wide organization, might be the local social service agency, it might be the seminary if that's one of your partners. So who can you show you're connected to in the larger church? Time and talent survey. This is a great example from New Life Evangelical Lutheran Church in New Tripoli, Pennsylvania. Tripoli. Wow. Okay, Tripoli. I stand corrected. So I grew up in Lexington, Kentucky, which is next to Versailles, Kentucky. So I get it. Yeah. So New Tripoli, I'll try to remember that. Anyway, I love this time and talent because it's online. It's a form that gets filled out, and it has the different activities that one might participate in and sign up for. Now, my favorite thing is this very specific time commitments. So it says, is this every Sunday for an hour, or is it a 15-minute gig once a month? Is anybody here not busy? I have a question. Is anybody here not busy? Yeah, that's what I thought. My calendar looks like that too. And so often, the reason people don't step up for being engaged in the work of the congregation is because they look at their calendars and they think, no, please, not one more thing, even if they really want to. But if you can help them be engaged because it's a 15-minute commitment or an hour commitment for 2 Saturdays, they're more likely to say yes. And it's a way of being welcoming to both the folks who do everything in your congregation and the folks who are pew sitters who do almost nothing and the folks who are thinking about maybe they might consider being a part of a congregation except they're afraid they're going to get overcommitted. It's hospitality. Financial stewardship, here we go. This was the question about, do we put the donation button on and do we put it in multiple places? I think that's up to you and how your website is structured. As I said, I probably wouldn't make it the first thing I see as a way of being hospitable, but having a secure site where people can donate or encouraging them to use some kind of a web-based online system. My husband and I are members of a small congregation in South Minneapolis. Now you have to understand, in Minneapolis, Small means 125 people, because many of them are 3,000, 4,000, 12,000 members, really, and they're Lutheran. Who knew? So we're a member of a small congregation. So we have a beautiful website, but we don't have the infrastructure to have secure donations. And you have to be attuned to that. You don't want to cause somebody grief with ID theft or whatever. So we use just our bank account for an automatic gift every month. And I find that works well for us. But if you want to put something on your website, I would do some research and look into it, and I think it's a great thing to do. This was an example from St. Timothy's in Hendersonville, Tennessee, where they included a QR code. You know, that's the thing that you take your cell phone and you take a picture, and you can automatically connect to the bank account and donate in that way. So that's one option. And another thing, a lot of congregations are putting on their website are podcasts or videos of their sermons. At our small congregation in South Minneapolis, we have a woman who sits, just about third pew back every Sunday with her cell phone and does a video of both the children's sermon and the sermon, the homily. And then by about 2:30 in the afternoon, she's uploaded it to the website. Now, the children's sermon is such a great idea because out of that 125 folks we have in worship, about 30 of them are under the age of 7, and they're in worship every Sunday. And it is holy chaos. I'll talk more about them in a minute. But what is the message that sends to someone who's a young parent who's looking for a church home where their kids will be welcome? Well, if they see holy chaos during the children's sermon, it's a good thing. So think about that. Now, the one thing I will caution you, as a publisher, I feel compelled to do this, is be careful about videotaping or podcasting your entire worship service, because you may be violating copyright laws. And that's not because of the big, bad, mean publishers. It's because of the copyright owners, particularly for music. That's considered broadcast. Now, you can get a broadcast license. I'm not an expert on that. Fortunately, I have a colleague who is, so if you have questions, send me an email later and I'll be happy to connect you with the person who actually knows what he's talking about on our staff. So podcasts and videos, though, are a great way to show folks before they ever come in your door, or for homebound people, or folks who just missed that Sunday to see what's going on. Yes, sir?
Just a question, when you have the kids sermon.
There are, and that's a good question, because I know where you're going. Are there kids in with the videotaped sermon? And yes, and they're never named, but you have to be clear in your community of faith that we're going to be doing this, and we're not going to name your kids, but there will be children videotaped or photographed. In some congregations, there might be a parent or two who, for good reason, don't ever want their child photographed. I was visiting a United Methodist church a few months ago, and we were doing some ethnographic research for some Sunday school curricula. And I went in, and we were taking photos, and we had gotten permission ahead of time, and they asked us not to take a picture of this particular child because there was an issue that was important to that child not be photographed. And so we were attentive to that. So you do need to be cognizant of that issue. But yeah, be careful with ever putting names on things like that. Same with social media and all kinds of things. There's an app for that. So Grace Lutheran Church in Tomahawk, Wisconsin has created their own mobile app. I know there are a number of others that have. I don't know a lot about this, about how much it costs or whatever, but they put daily devotions on. They have little mini Bible studies led by both lay people and clergy. They have their calendar. They have connections to their social media and so forth. So if you're interested and want to find out more, I'd go out to the App Store or wherever you find mobile apps and look for some examples and just download them. They're almost always free, and just take a look and see what they're doing. This was a congregation, St. James, that they're in a call process. And so the way they keep their community up to date about what's happening with their call process is to have updates on their website. Blogs. Blogs are not for the faint of heart because, like websites, they have to be kept up to date. First English Lutheran Church is a large congregation in Appleton, Wisconsin, and they have multiple blogs to reach different folks. So they have an over 50 blog, and they have a parenting blog, and they have all kinds of things. Or a video blog. We have a number of synods and congregations who do little video snippets of 3 minutes or so of different people who lead different ministries talking about their ministries or talking about something related to the church year and what's happening within the congregation. I have a blog. You are welcome to follow me on it. It's easy to find. It's augsburgfortress.org/blog. Pretty original, huh? Social media. Lots of different opportunities for social media. And I always love talking about this, except when Keith Anderson is in the room. He's back there. You have one of the experts on church and social media in your midst. And if you're not taking advantage of that, you should. We do. This is good. This is good. So all kinds of social media, and it's moving and changing rapidly. This is an example from Church of the Lutheran Church of the Holy Spirit in Emmaus, and you can see on their website they have links to the various social media outlets in which they're engaged. So this is their YouTube channel, this is their Twitter feed, this is their Facebook page. I want to go back and look at those. I want you to look at the design. Their website, this is their YouTube channel, this is their Twitter feed, and this is their Facebook page. All of them use a pretty similar design. It could be a little more similar, but I think they've done a pretty good job. Sometimes when I look at the social media for a congregation, if I didn't know, I couldn't even tell it was the same church. And it's about branding. It's about when I look at that and I see that logo that I know that that's connected to this. Sometimes in the church we think, oh, branding, marketing, we don't want to talk about that. We're the church. Well, we are also all consumers, and so are those folks we're trying to reach. And we are so attuned to looking at branding. If I said, close your eyes and think about what's the Coca-Cola logo look like, every one of us knows what it looks like. Why is that? Because it's consistent, and we've seen it over and over and over. So let's not squander this real estate on the web, and let's make it consistent for our congregations too. But I can see it on your faces, some of you thinking, oh my goodness, she wants me to do Twitter, and she wants me to have a blog, and she wants me to do Facebook, and she wants me to fix our website. And what if you have limited time, limited money, and you can only do one thing? Well, good news, there's one thing to do. This is the social network user penetration by age for a number of different social media outlets. And left to right, it's ages 18 to 34. That's the high bar, that's 91% that you can barely see on Facebook over there. The ages 35 to 54, it's at 85%. And 55 plus at 69%. Is that right? Yeah. So it is ubiquitous. It's everywhere. And if you're just really not sure you believe me, well, let's look at this other data. So this one is by gender. Look at the high bar. It's the big blue one that says Facebook. Oh, should we look about it by different ethnic groups? I'll be darned, look at that. It's the big blue bar. Let's look at it about rural, urban, and suburban. I'll be darned, it's the big blue bar. If you only have time, energy to do one thing in social media, it's Facebook, because that's where we are. And what can you do with Facebook? Well, there's lots of things you can do. I love this one. This is from St. Luke's Episcopal Church. It says, "The table is set, but why are there stuffed animals and pet supplies in front of the altar at St. Luke's? Guess you'll have to come to church to find out, won't you? Or find out on the way," and it gives their web address on their event page, and we're the second slideshow at the top. It's got a URL. I mean, aren't you curious? Why are there stuffed animals and pet food in front of that altar? If somebody's following you on Facebook and they see that, I mean, they might actually show up on Sunday to find out. Here's one from Seattle, St. Luke's Episcopal in Seattle. It's an urban congregation. It's kind of in the Ballard area, if you know Seattle, and they have a marvelous homeless ministry where they serve meals, and they're looking for help. So they're encouraging people to come and help by posting it on their Facebook page with specifics about days and hours and so forth. And some of us know Chris Duckworth. Anybody here know Chris Duckworth? Phil Cray? Phil's son-in-law is a pastor in Indiana, and he uses Facebook for advertising big events like their Christmas Eve service. I'm sure he'll do it for Holy Week. And so he posted this on Facebook, and I asked his permission to share it in my hospitality workshops, where he shared the stats that with a little dollar amount, because you only pay as people click through, he reached 242 people at a total amount of $2.38. That sure beats putting an ad in the Yellow Pages, where you don't know if you've reached anyone, and I can guarantee you there's a couple of zeros at least on that $2.38 comparatively. So think about your website, think about social media and how you might creatively use it to be welcoming. Now, started out with the audit team. I showed you how I call a church and how I look at their website and their social media all before I decide to come. I haven't arrived yet at your front door. I want you to talk to each other, think about what should we do to help people find out about us and about our church before they ever arrive at our door.